a much bigger mantra, because it's actually a lot more difficult to find good people than, and I see people, nodding their heads in that regard, than we come to think.
Terry, yeah, go ahead.
I have one comment on the that whole severance piece and treating people with dignity. What we found is part of the reputation that remains with you out in the market. If you don't treat people well, that's not a value piece to it, and that only comes back to indeed bite you. I absolutely believe that. Also, to answer Lisa's question, in our particular case, this acquisition from other ones that I've been involved in, this was easy. We had employment agreements for the top people, and there was an earn-out for the top guy, so he had every reason to indeed make it work. But the good piece about it is, and I'll credit part of it to luck, everybody there wanted to make it work, and everybody on our side wanted to make it work, and that was a key piece to it.
I would take a little contrarian view to that. Not about the respect part. I think that's essential.
About the dignity part?
Dignity. I gave that up. Both of us were at GE, so that goes out the job. So, our headquarters folks were given very, very generous severance packages as part of their employment agreements when they first came on. For us, as a part of change management, we had a lot of resistance from the operating companies around change. The issues weren't with them. What we found we had to do in order to move forward was to change the changers. We had a bunch of folks who just didn't know how to connect with our field organizations, and there was a big disconnect. By offering people too rich a severance package up front, it cost us a lot of equity that frankly we would have preferred to retain and be able to offer to the next generation. It cost us more cash than it ought to, and I think it introduced another variable that perhaps made us move a little slower or think things through a bit. So my learning in this is promise a little lower, give a little more at the moment, and it leaves you more flexibility to make the changes that you need as you go along.
Very good. I think there's another question way in the back there. Bob, yeah.
Yeah, good morning. My background's operational president, prior to that regional CFO, industrial services and construction sector, Harsco Corporation, for those who may know that business. And this question is really to Harry. Harry, you talked about safety, and safety was our number one principle. We delivered 3.5 million man-hours of service to the market just in my region. And my question is, when you're talking about change, behavioral change, transformational change, can you say a few words about the union environment and how you drive change through businesses with significant union populations, and what challenges that may pose to you in the past?
Start with challenge. First is to get them to indeed listen with it. But what we wound up doing, we have more unions than I can keep track of across the country. And some are really great about it. Some will actually act like they really like their people and almost are non-union with it. With the bulk of the unions, when we had to put forth, for example, the drug testing, that was probably the biggest issue with it, because some just decided that they wouldn't allow us to indeed do it, and there were some states that unfortunately would back that. But overall, we were able to convince the union that from a safety standpoint, it was necessary to do that. More importantly, we pointed out that if you want your people to get into these various sites, they have to be able to show that they passed the drug test. In some cases, they had what was known as a Twix card. So if you don't allow us to do it, your people aren't going to work. That registered very quickly from a value situation, and they got that right away. The second piece to it was, from a safety standpoint, if we don't show good safety numbers, we're not going to get work. And we actually took them aside and showed, here's where we were a year ago, here's where we are now, from these type of pieces that we indeed put in. If we don't continue to do that, this company over here is going to indeed get the business. We're not. Your people aren't going to be working. Those were the two tacks that we used. I can't tell you that that was successful in every place, because in some cases, actually in New York was probably our biggest one, they're not going to indeed listen. They don't have to. But in other parts of the country, if we could show here was the relationship between your people working, us getting work, keeping them working, we had significant success with it.
Pete, you have a point?
Yeah, just a little story. We spent some time with a utility company, electric utility company, several years ago that was going through major transformation. And obviously you can't do this everywhere, but I talked about change champions. And in this particular case, they had identified a number of change champions that were going to do some of the lower level work and also were highly credible. And purposefully, and obviously they had pretty good relationships with their unions, they selected, out of those change champions, about half of them were in the union workforce. And they selected shop stewards who were selected by their brothers and sisters as part of that. And we brought them into major pieces of the change process. And it was fascinating because for the first month or two, they would sit back or grumble and explain why this wouldn't work. And it was fascinating because by the end, they were truly the champions for the change. And I don't think that they could have done what they did without those men and women being part of it. Again, you can't do it everywhere, but it certainly worked there.
Well, thanks, Pete. I think we're all champions here, and I think there's probably some more questions out there in the audience. But unfortunately, the tyranny of the clock is such that it's 9:30, and I did promise we'd get you all out of here by then. So, many thanks for coming. Again, my compliments on your bravery for coming out early on a cold morning.